All right, so leagues aren't quite open yet, but we know it's close. Oh, we know it's close. Word has it, legend even, that Yahoo is just testing some stuff behind the scenes before leagues open up in the next potentially few hours. Still hoping for today, although it sounds like the mock rooms might not be open for a week or two yet. So it's kind of a little bit of a good news, bad news situation here. Either way, once Yahoo leagues are open, it opens up our opportunity to start talking about pre-ranks. So believe me, we got plenty to talk about. I don't know how the hell I'm coming off this Team USA high right now. That was an insane basketball game. And I realize that some of you are listening to this podcast later. You're watching the video the next day, whatever. That game, USA-Serbia, was nuts. What a day, man. What a day of Olympic basketball. We're not going to talk about it because it has almost no bearing on fantasy, although Joel Embiid looked pretty healthy in this one. Just saying. Zone defense be damned. Steph looked pretty healthy, too. I got all these guys that I think are going to fall a little bit in drafts, and they're going to, explosion city here. Hopefully everybody goes back to kind of thinking that they're headed the wrong way by the time fantasy drafts come around, and maybe we can capitalize on that. Before we get into the Milwaukee Bucks on today's episode, I want to remind you guys you can find me on Twitter at Dan Vespers, at Old Man Squad on Twitter, at Old Man Squad. That's the network that we're on. It's fun. It's new. It's fresh. It's a network. Anyway, we got a whole bunch of amazing shows. Kings Weekly dropped an episode this morning. Who the hell am I forgetting here? I want to give a couple of shout outs to my fellow Old Man Squad hosts. Let's see. We got Kings Weekly with an episode dropping this morning. We had 90 Feet From Home with Joe Arico. That's every day, so no surprise there. Ordinary Effort dropped a show yesterday, I believe. That's the Immaculate Grid podcast. The Bird Rights with Stephen Bagel broke down the Western Conference, part of a 3-hour set. Fantasy Six Pack with Joe Bond. This is all over the last 2 days or whatever. So we got a lot of cool stuff over at Old Man Squad. Make sure to give that a follow so you can see the different hosts and their shows as they drop. Like and subscribe as we cruise into the stuff we're going to be talking about today, because, again, that is the way that we continue to remind or alert or whatever it is, let people know that I am doing my own little project here now. It's hard to start from zero. We're doing it, though. Things are moving in the right direction. I like that. Starting to see some traction over on the YouTubes. That's what the kids call it, the YouTubes. So the Milwaukee Bucks, I didn't think we were going to have that much to talk about with the Cavaliers yesterday, and we ended up going for 40 minutes on them. Today, I'm thinking we probably do have some stuff to talk about on the Bucks, and guessing we probably end up going shorter because obviously I have no idea how much I'm going to prattle on about these players. There were 5 Milwaukee Bucks last year that had relevant fantasy value. Those 5 players were Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Brook Lopez, Khris Middleton, minus the injury stuff, Bobby Portis. And then you had intermittent blips where Malik Beasley went on a heater and he would go top 75 for 2-3 weeks or whatever it was. Patrick Beverley had a couple of fill-in games. They brought him along partway through the year. And that was about as far as it extended. The Bucks did have a couple of off-season moves. Nothing massive, but they basically just rotated the Malik Beasley spot on their roster with Gary Trent Jr., who, by all accounts, should make them a little bit better. He's not as big as Beasley, but he's significantly quicker. And it feels like that's probably a step up, because for this Bucks team, what they badly needed last year was anybody, literally anyone at all, besides Giannis, that could keep an offensive player in front of them. And none of these guys could do it. All credit goes out to Beasley for trying to turn himself into a better defender, and he did, by all accounts, get better on that side of the ball. But Khris Middleton is moving like he's in molasses. Dame has never been able to guard anyone. Brook Lopez is great in drop coverage, but he ain't switching on the perimeter with anybody. And then Bobby Portis, he's forget the offensive side because Portis is a high energy dude, but with him, it always looks like he's doing more on defense than he actually is. So the Bucks went out and got a little bit quicker on the defensive side of the ball. They also brought in DeLon Wright on an affordable deal to go along with the they brought in Taurean Prince as well. So they have plenty of wings to go in that spot that fills in, backup to Khris Middleton, along with who the hell was there last year? Jay Crowder was there. I think he's still around. Doesn't really matter. Main point here is that the Bucks, I would argue, got a little bit deeper and probably in a good way. And it also opens up a little bit of fantasy value for them because historically, Gary Trent Jr. has had better fantasy game than Malik Beasley. Let's talk about the guys that are still there, and then we'll do Gary Trent last because in my eyes, he's really the only guy they brought in that has a viable shot at fantasy value. Taurean Prince will play, 18 to 22 minutes a game. He'll be fighting with Crowder and Pat Connaughton and all these guys, and so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Of the guys that were there last year, Bobby Portis finished, say it last among them in 9 category leagues. He was number 106. He played in all 82 games, so by totals, it was really a nice year for Bobby. He is your classic big man who doesn't really hurt you in any places, but also doesn't really help almost anywhere. He's ever so slightly above league average in field goal percent. It's kind of it. He's a little bit better than that in rebounds and turnovers. He's ever so slightly below league average in free throw. Better for a big man. Threes, points, steals, blocks. He's like just below league average in a lot of these things. So he ends up as one of those guys who, and we've talked about this 1,000 times on different podcasts over the last 5 or 6 years. If you're very close to league average in everything, you're right around the top 75. And for Portis, he's a little bit better in 3, and he's a little bit worse in 6, basically. So not surprisingly, he's just a little bit behind that 75 marker. Unfortunately for Bobby Portis, the way that he sees activity, at least consistently so, is Giannis or Brook Lopez missing basketball games. And last year, those guys combined to only miss 12 games. So there just wasn't really that extended opportunity for Bobby to go out and have, a month of better numbers. The way that, frankly, it had been for a few years. Because Giannis, this was a particularly healthy year for Giannis. The season prior, Antetokounmpo missed 19 ball games, not surprisingly. Portis, who didn't shoot the ball as well and didn't get as many defensive stats, played 26 minutes a game last season, the prior year, and that dropped to 24.5 this most recent season, almost exclusively because Giannis was in an extra 10 games, basically. No, exactly 10 games. So you take out those 10 games where Portis gets to play 29 minutes instead of 23, and the average or his totals for the year drop. Simple mathematics. I think you have to go into another season assuming that Giannis and Brook Lopez aren't going to miss more. Well, this is a pretty good one. I think 12 games missed between the two of them was about as good as it's going to get. Although, again, the prior year, Brook Lopez missed 4, Giannis missed 19, so that's more 23. Maybe that's more an expected number, each guy missing around 10. Brolo, I hate that nickname. Brook Lopez and Giannis each missing about 10 ball games this coming year. If Portis plays basically every day, then that would give him 20 games where he's an automatic start because he rolls about top 50 when those guys are out. And then you'll get 60 games where you're like, borderline 120 kind of range. I think I like Portis more on the head-to-head side. He's been relatively durable lately. He doesn't hurt you. He just sort of slowly racks up stats and doesn't do much in the defensive side. It was better this year than the prior season. And, 0.4 and 0.2 the prior year was particularly awful. Like, you have to be very, very bad at defensive stats and also quite unlucky to be that low. That's sub Danilo Gallinari territory, who, by the way, is also on the Bucks. Not that it matters, but just for funsies. And I get it, that year prior, Portis got to do more because Middleton missed most of the season. There was a lot of stuff going on. No Dame around town. I wouldn't expect Portis's usage to see much of a spike, but he got around 11 shots a ball game. He just came out and he started chucking, and he's probably going to try to do that again. So head-to-head side, I'm totally fine with Portis, drafting him, after 100, just sort of slowly racking up stats all season long. He's not a game changer for your team, but if he's out there all year and he's just fine all season, that's okay. I don't really want that on the games cap side because I mostly want to be trotting dudes out that I think have a legitimate shot to sit 75 or better, especially if I'm going to have to use a 100 range pick on them. Second lowest number of the Bucks regulars this past season belonged to Khris Middleton, who finished at number 100 in only 27 minutes a ball game. He only played in 55 out of 82 games. He continues to be hurt all the time. He had ankle surgery this offseason. Kind of secretly, there was that note that came out like a month ago, a little more than a month ago, I think it was now. That was like, oh, Kyrie Irving had surgery, and oh, Khris Middleton had surgery again. I want nothing, hear me, nothing to do with Khris Middleton this season. You pretty much couldn't pay me enough to stick him on my fantasy roster because you're going to be sitting on a ton of DNPs. You never know when they're going to rest him, which is going to be annoying throughout the year. And they're going to kid glove him all season long because this Bucks team knows that with Dame, Giannis, Brook Lopez, throw Gary Trent into the mix now, and Portis, they're going to be in the upper 4-5 seed range in the Eastern Conference, even if they're all terrible. You could get bad seasons from all of those guys, and they're still a top 5 team in the East. They're not going to be worried about being top 2 instead of top 4 if the difference is having an upright Middleton for the playoffs. So just don't even stress about it. Middleton might fall to pick 115. I still don't want him. I know that sounds insane, but he has been, I would argue, the single biggest headache in all of fantasy basketball over the last now, I mean, we're probably looking at 3 seasons, depending on how this one goes. The last 2, for sure, he's been the most annoying because there was no reporting, not this year, but the other one, 2022, and he ended up playing only 33 games that year. Has sat on him the whole year. Many teams did because he just kept, he's almost coming back. Remember, that season started with a report the Sunday before the Tuesday the season started saying, oh, Khris wasn't quite ready to start the year. 6 weeks later, he played for like a week, and then he went down for another month. It was ungodly. And it was the same crap this last year. Middleton, not quite healthy coming into the season. He shot the ball better this year. His stroke was a little bit more Middleton-esque. And I get it. For many seasons, 4, 5, 6. I mean, he's been on the Bucks since 2013 now. Middleton, I know it's crazy, by the way. Remember when Tobias Harris was involved in all this stuff? That was like 2012. It's been forever. I was a kid. I didn't even have my first child until he was in his 4th season in Milwaukee. There were so many years that Middleton in Milwaukee was just easy money. Like 2015 on, basically. He had that one catastrophic knee injury in 2016. Every other year, easy money. And then all of a sudden, not this year, but the last one, just not anymore. He's just, some guys age faster. He's 32. He shouldn't be on the back end of his prime quite the way he is, but he is. By the way, his first name is actually James. Not sure if you guys knew that. James Christian Middleton. James Middleton has been unplayable for 2 seasons because he sits out for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ball games and pops up, and then you got to take zeros for 3 days before he gets the IL tag again. If you're in a league that doesn't have IL plus, and a lot of leagues still don't, I can't just come on this pod and insist, oh, you only must play in IL plus leagues. Well, the Yahoo public ones didn't have it last year. It's not your choice, really. If you want to just parachute into a public league, so be it. So my take on this Middleton stuff is I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with 55 games again. I don't want to deal with the 27 minutes a ball game. I understand that if you're in a games cap roto format and he falls to like 120, You kind of feel like you have to. Okay, fine, because his zeros are not going to kill you. And if he gets into the high 20s in minutes, then he's a shoo-in for top 100 or better. But head-to-head, no chance. And Roto, I'm not spending anything before a 9th or 10th round pick on him because I have guys that I actually want that I think can contribute all season long without the headache. This is that moment in the show, and I'm trying to do a better job of this, of letting everybody know. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back to break down the other 4 bucks that I want to talk about on today's program. Brook Lopez. He was number 45 in 9-cat this last year after starting the season in the 20s. Brook Lopez is a classic case of we got to look at both halves of the season. And when I say halves, I basically mean the half with Adrian Griffin at the helm and the half with Doc Rivers at the helm. And the Doc half simply wasn't as good. He wasn't bad necessarily, and his minutes didn't change all that much necessarily, but his role shifted considerably. First 4 months of the season, Brook Lopez was ranked in the top 25 to 30 range. The last 2 months, he was number 90. It was a huge drop-off. Gargantuan. And it largely fell on one statistical category. Not entirely, but largely. He was playing about 31 minutes a game under Adrian Griffin. He was playing about 29 minutes a game under Doc Rivers. The big issue, though, scoring, yes, that dropped. He was at like 13. It dropped to 11.5. Not a big deal. His threes stayed almost exactly the same. Rebounds came down from 5 to about 4.5. Assists basically didn't change at all. But defensive stats dropped from 2.9 to 2.2. That was the difference. Field goal percent stayed almost exactly the same. Took about a shot less, but that's really not the thing we were looking at. Defensive stats. From half a steal and 2.4 blocks to 0.4 steals and 1.8 blocks. It's Jaren Jackson Jr.itis or syndrome, JJJ syndrome. If something changes about what you're doing on a basketball court and it costs you a quarter to a third of your defensive stats, your rank is going to fall. And because so much of Brook Lopez's value was tied up in the fact that he was adequate in like 7 things and really, really good in 1, if you remove the really, really good and you just get adequate across the board, we've talked about this, you're 75 range or maybe a tiny bit worse. The Bucks have done nothing this offseason to assuage my fears that Brook Lopez is not going to be just sitting back near the bucket and blocking everything that comes his way. I mean, maybe it's just a regular bounce. Maybe the 2 months where he was lower blocks was just evening out with some of the months earlier on. But I don't know how badly I want to take that shot because it actually trended down further over the last 1 month of the season. I think with Brook Lopez, the nice thing about Brook, because I don't want to sound like I'm pooping on a dude that's basically been the logo of the Dan Vesper's Old Man Squad. There's been a few of them, but Brook Lopez has certainly been among the list. He's someone that we've had on our teams, basically since he went to the Bucks. Because, like, his time with the Lakers, they screwed with him, and then he was just this perfect fit in Milwaukee. He had 1 season where his back knocked him out for the entire year. That was Happy Bobby Portis Day. Otherwise, his time in Milwaukee, he's been a fantasy juggernaut. 2.2, 2.4, 1.5. What happened there? The injury season, 2.5, 2.4. Those are the blocks totals for Brook in Milwaukee. It hasn't fluctuated all that much until the second half of this past season when it dropped back down into the 1s, other than that 1 year. That was the COVID year. No, that was the following season, the COVID purposefully shortened 2020-2021 campaign. The nice thing, as I was just saying about Embiid, is you're not going to have to pay much to draft him. So even if you think he has a down year, which I do, I don't say that I've soured on Embiid, or Brook Lopez, I should say. I haven't soured on Brook Lopez. I just want to make sure we're not spending anything to get him. For a while here, you could get him at 70, 80, 90, whatever, and you had a pretty good shot to get that top 50 clip. I think you're looking at more like 60 to 85 range this season. So make sure you're getting him back of that number, 80 or deeper, and then I'm okay with it. Giannis Antetokounmpo, next name on the list here, as I once again remind you guys to subscribe to whatever's going on. Drop a 5-star review if you're listening after the fact, and make sure to hit the like button, little thumbs up over on the YouTubes. And Giannis is the easiest and shortest analysis we're going to do because Giannis is Giannis. He had 30 points, 11.5 boards, 6.5 assists, 2.3 combined defensive stats, half a three-pointer. 61% from the field on 19 shots a game, and 66% at the free throw line on 11 of them per game. Yikes. He is the definition of a punt free throw play. The definition of it. He goes from a mid-third rounder to basically the top of the board. He's number 4 in all of fantasy basketball if you're punting free throws. Thus, he's going to get drafted in the middle of the first round by some team that's punting free throws. There's just no analysis needed other than I would very quietly remind everyone that Giannis has taken zero heat for missing basketball games. And this past year, he finally played in a healthier complement of games again, really for the first time in like 3 or 4 years. Because the prior 2 seasons, he missed 15 and then 19. He'd been in double digits for 3 years in a row. And then this past season, he missed only 9 games, which I think some of that was like learning new system. They wanted to make sure he got in there to play as many games as possible with the mid-season coaching swap. He was terrific. Just don't be blown away if that games played number for Giannis does tick down a little bit season over season. I would expect the target for Giannis in games played is around 70 to 72. Anything over that, call it just a year where he felt really good. Anything under that, maybe an injury or 2 legitimate ones actually popped up. So just know that you're probably not getting a dude who's aiming to play in 77 or 78 out of 82 games. You're probably getting a dude who's aiming to play in 72-ish. And then if he gets there, he did this last year. Great. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Just be ready for that. Otherwise, Giannis is Giannis. Damian Lillard. The last holdover buck that we're going to talk about before we get into Gary Trent Jr. Dame was number 24, technically by 9Cat. He was the highest ranked member of the Milwaukee Bucks. But of course, again, if you were drafting Giannis, you were punting free throws. So by all accounts, he was the more valuable of the 2 players. Dame, 24 points on 17.5 shots per game, 4.5 rebounds, 7 assists, a steal, and 3 3-pointers. He was, as always, an extraordinarily positive free throw guy. And this was the real twist, really a bad field goal percent play this last year. We haven't seen Dame down in that 42% range in a healthy season in a while. 2015 is basically the last time that you could point to a healthy Damian Lillard shooting under 44% from the field. And if you're wondering, it's not because the shot distribution changed all that much. In fact, this year he took less than 50% of his shots from downtown. Last year in Portland, when he was going buck wild at 46% from the field, he was taking closer to 55% of his shots from downtown. What happened this year with Damian Lillard was that he couldn't hit anything. 3-pointers, 2-pointers, you name it. It was a poor effort. He's had some poor 2-point shooting seasons before. It's not this isn't like a, and frankly, it's the same story on the 3-point side. He's had seasons where he's shot this number before. He shot 35.5% from 3. He shot 49% from 2. He has shot 49-ish% from 2 as recently, That wasn't a healthy year. That was 2 years ago when he had the oblique injury. And then you got to go all the way back to like 2015 when he shot 49.5%. Sorry, that was 45%. In 2016, he shot 49% from 2. So it's happened before. It's been a while when a healthy Dame has shot 49% from 2, but it's been a while. 35% from 3, it's been forever. A healthy Dame shot worse than this from 3 way back in 2014. Basically a decade ago. The reason that this season was so bad overall was that he had both of those bad shooting numbers on the same year. Last time he shot 49, healthy, 49 from 2, he was at 37 from 3. Last time he shot 35% or worse from 2, he shot from 3, he shot 50% from 2. And so one semi canceled out the other. By the way, each time I'm looking back 8, 9, 10, 11 years, by the way. And I get it. His role was different in Milwaukee than it was in Portland. But by the way, let me use this as an example of people are like, oh, he's just going to get opener shots. Sometimes being more open is less important than just being comfortable. I didn't think Dame was all that comfortable this season. This last season, I should say. And you can break the year down however you like. He basically shot 42% the entire year. He was almost at 42% every month. Like, it was remarkably consistent at that lower mark. And yet, I can't help but think that there's a 43, a 44, or a 45 in the tank still. Because he's still Dame. And I know he's getting a little bit older. You know, I know he's 34. Just had a birthday like 3 weeks ago. So he's on the wrong side of the midpoint. But I don't think that we can just expect the 46 to become 42 and stay there forever. There's going to be some fluctuations to it. Despite all of this mess, Dame still finished at the back end of the second round on a per-game basis. So it wasn't like you drafted Dame at 12 and he ruined your team. It wasn't good. I don't want to try to sugarcoat it. And by totals, he played 73 games, so that made him number 19 on the total side. A little bit better there, but not all that different per game to total. I think Damian Lillard might end up being a really nice, super safe second round type of play. Reminds me a little bit of James Harden in that with Harden, there's a little bit more excitement, I think, because he's going to get to do more this year. And whenever we see a guy that's going to do more, immediately the brain is like, well, how much more? I need to be excited about this. Dame isn't about to do more. His role is going to stay probably exactly the same year over year. 17 and some odd shots, something in that neck of the woods. Bunch of free throws. Bucks are going to get to the foul line a lot as a team because they've got both Dame and Giannis. My hope, basically my one and only hope for this Bucks team, for Dame, is that he shoots 44% instead of 42. And that little bit, I know it seems small, but to turn a massive tanking field goal percent negative into something that any random big man can cover up does change fantasy value a lot. That's enough to push him from end of second round to early second round. That's all it would take. Because you fix field goal percent, you add points, you add threes. All of that, assuming all of that stuff goes in. So scoring goes up by a point, threes go up by a couple tenths of a percentage point, field goal percent by 2%, whatever it is. You get these three categories all pushing forward. That's how you move half to 2/3 of a round. Do I want to take Dame at pick 15? No, I think you max out his value there. Will I take him at 15? Sure, why not? Because the worst case scenario is like 30th. And how many times have we talked about how just avoiding disasters in the second round might be the best strategy for winning at fantasy basketball these days? Because everybody gets pushed in either direction. The boring dudes get pushed down, and that's why there's always like 6 guys I want that are going in the third round. And the really exciting dudes get pushed up to the end of the first round. And what's left in the middle are these guys where you're like, well, if they're healthy, they could hit their mark. like Domantas Sabonis. He's not going to get there per game, or Anthony Edwards not going to get there per game, but by totals maybe. Or you get like a Donovan Mitchell or a Kawhi Leonard or a Kyrie Irving second round. Guys are just like, look, these guys are going to be good per game, but are they going to play 65 games? Are they even trying to get to 65? Sometimes no. And Dame falls into that category of guys, at least in my opinion, that's kind of combined those two things, where not only do you hope they can get to 72 or higher games played, not a guarantee, but I mean, Dame played 73 this year. Not only do they have a shot to clear the 65 game threshold, thank goodness, but they also have a safer floor than someone like a Domantas Sabonis or an Anthony Edwards, where there it's like, look, the floor for those guys, Sabonis, now you got to work in DeRozan. I do think he's going to be fine, by the way. Edwards, I honestly don't know what more he can do other than just continuing to kind of fix things incrementally. These are guys that just don't really have a shot to be second rounders per game. I guess Sabonis could sniff it. Maybe Edwards is the better example. Dame could be a second rounder per game, and with a little bit of health, he could push into the first round by totals. Harden, maybe even a little bit more than that. So I kind of group those types together. Guys that I think could be, late second round floor type of dudes, where maybe the upside isn't what it used to be in their heyday, but there's a little bit there that we didn't get to see last season. And finally, there's Gary Trent Jr., who I think it's important to note how different his role is likely to be in Milwaukee versus Toronto, and then also where there are some similarities. First things first, Gary Trent Jr. probably just slots basically right into Malik Beasley's spot. But if Khris Middleton does get his minutes up at any point, that's a number that could trend the wrong way, especially if Taurean Prince starts to play well, if they want to go a little bit bigger. But he easily played 30 minutes a game this last year. I don't think Trent is guaranteed 30 minutes a basketball game. Okay, great. In Toronto last year, he played 28, and he was number 145 with numbers that, by the way, were not that dissimilar from Beasley. Malik Beasley's line this last year was 11 points, 4 boards, 1.5 assists, 3 3-pointers, basically, and 0.8 defensive stats on 44-71 splits. Gary Trent Jr. this last year was 14 points per game, 2.5 threes, under 3 rebounds, 2.5 of those, 1.7 assists, 1.2 defensive stats on 43-77 splits. We do know that Gary Trent Jr. can be better than that at the free throw line. Can be. 82%er in his career. This is a bad season by all accounts at the foul line. So hopefully that's a thing that would get better. We also know that he's probably not just going to fall into a dozen shots right out of the chute on a Milwaukee team that has all these dudes. Beasley took only 9 shots a game last year. He had to be very efficient from downtown to get to his 11 points per game. So if Trent comes in and he only gets 9 shots a ball game, which is very conceivable given the pecking order is still Giannis and Dame and Middleton at the very least, and probably I would also argue Bobby Portis ahead of Trent Jr., maybe even Brook Lopez, there just ain't much left. So as much as I'd like to point to the second or really like the last 2 months of this last year when the Raptors had a bunch of, Scotty Barnes basically went down, Jakob Poeltl went down, RJ Barrett missed like half of the games over that stretch, and Gary Trent suddenly got to take 16 shots a ball game. And as folks watching on YouTube can see, during those last 25 games of the year, he was a top 60 fantasy play because he was averaging 19, 4, and 2 with 1.5 defensive stats and 3 threes. And 86% of the foul line on not much in the way of volume, but some. That's not happening. 9 shots a game is not enough for somebody who's not piling up steals, rebounds, assists, things of that nature. You need to be so good in other things to have fantasy value on only 9 shots a game. I mean, I get it. Big men can do it. We see it all the time. Traditional big men getting 9 shots a game. They get their rebounds, they get their blocks, they get their field goal percent. That type of stuff works out. It's really hard I'm going to look for a guy that's not like a powerhouse in any one statistical category and 9 shots per game or less they post fantasy value. Here, I'll just give you the names off the board. Here are the names running down the list of guys that took 9 shots a game or less and where they were ranked. Daniel Gafford took 6.5 shots a game last year. He was number 36 because he shot 73% from the field and blocked over 2 shots per game. 2 hyper elite categories. Let's keep going. Brook Lopez was close at 9.6 shots per game, but he blocked 2.4 shots per ball game. 1 hyper elite category, serving it up. Rudy Gobert, 8 shots a game, 2.1 blocks, 66% from the field, 13 rebounds. 3 hyper elite categories. Alex Caruso, 2.7 combined defensive stats and 2 3-pointers. The 2 threes was not elite, but the steals and blocks from a guard were elite on 7.5 shots per game. He was number 52. Grayson Allen at number 58 is quite literally the best case scenario for a shooting guard getting 9 shots a game. And it took a 50-40-90 year basically to get him there. 13.5 points, 2.7 threes, 4 boards, 3 assists, 1.5 combined defensive stats, and he shot 49.9% from the field, like 45% from downtown, and 88 at the free throw line. His percentages were insane, stuff that Gary Trent Jr. won't come close to sniffing in field goal percent. He rebounded better. He assists better than Trent. And so that, by the way, is the absolute pinnacle, the apex of what a low shots per game guy could do. Herb Jones is another example, but he was a 50%, 87% dude, 2.2 combined defensive stats. There's just no real argument to be made here that Gary Trent Jr. has the fantasy game anymore to be anything better in 9 shots per game than, frankly, 75 would be the absolute best case. And more than likely, you're looking at something outside the top 100. Because he's pretty much going to have to go for like 1.5 steals per game or better to have any fantasy value with 9 shots per game. And I don't think that's happening because I don't think 32 minutes a game is guaranteed for him. I think 27 is probably guaranteed, meaning all the little stuff that accrues the longer you're on a basketball court, rebounds, assists, steals, things of that nature. It's not even going to have time to accrue. The guys that you point at on the list from last year and you're like, oh, I guess maybe we could get Gary Trent Jr. that is like DeAnthony Melton before he got hurt. 1.6 steals, 2 3-pointers. Could Trent get to that? Maybe. All right. So I've talked about how sour I am on Gary Trent Jr., but that probably isn't the right analysis for working towards a fantasy draft because what it all comes down to isn't whether or not I think he's going to be useful in any way. Yes, obviously, that's more of a binary thing. Do I think he's going to be useful? Sure. Is he going to be fantasy useful? That hovers somewhere in the, I think, doesn't matter territory. But if I'm sitting on pick 140 and Gary Trent Jr. is still out there, I might take a shot on him. Maybe. If all of the guys that I think have better upside are gone, because then at least I'm like, look, I think this guy's going to start. I think he's going to get close to starters minutes. Maybe he just legitimately outplays some other dudes, or maybe he has an all-world steals kind of season because he has had those pop up once in a blue moon. There 2 years in a row in Toronto, he was at 1.7 and 1.6 steals per ball game. It tapered off this year, as did his minutes, to just 1.1. But Gary Trent Jr., now admittedly, he was taking a lot of shots those years, but if you adjusted his steals from 1.1 to 1.6 this past season, you get a guy who's sitting in the top 100 range. He was 145 at his exact numbers right now. If you gave him another basically 30 to 40 steals over the course of the year, and that goes to becoming a big elite category, he could be top 100. Problem, of course, is that you could draft him and he could have 3 games where he gets no steals to start the year. You're going to drop him, and then he might get 6 in back-to-back games on games 4 and 5. Someone's going to pick him up, and you're going to miss it. So I do think overall the headache is probably going to outweigh the upside. But if you need steals badly late and some three-pointers, he's probably an opportunity for that. You could draft him in Games Cap Roto and not play him on the first half of the year if you really wanted to. Head-to-head, he's probably fine, but he profiles as more of that kind of, like what Josh and I talked about, that Harrison Barnes type who's just going to sort of quietly doink along at like 120. And it's going to be boring, and it's not going to be that helpful or fun. Then, so that's why you probably end up thinking about leaving him alone. But we'll see. Pre-ranks might be out soon. Hell, they might be up by the time this podcast is posted. Nope, just refreshed the page. Fantasy basketball is not quite open yet. I tweeted at my good buddy Dan Titus. He says it's almost ready. It's open on the back end for him and his Yahoo cronies, but not quite ready for us, we regular folk. As they call us in House of the Dragon, we small folk. Small folk. I'm a small folk. But I'm an excited small folk because as soon as that sucker's open, we're going straight into the rankings. Oh, it's going to be so juicy. We're going to start doing multiple podcasts a day. It's going to be nuts. It's going to be nuts. And we're going to get guests. We're going to do another cycle, another round of them. Basically trying to do like half the shows every month with guests these days. And so far, pretty close. It'll be a lot easier after Labor Day when both of my kids are back in school again. My older starts on Monday. That's useful, but my younger's only in camp for part of the day, so not quite as much time in there. But don't worry, we're going to put our foot on the gas, and we're going to get rolling here real soon. That, by the way, and I know you're looking on YouTube at the Raptors on your screen right now, that wraps up our look at the Milwaukee Bucks. The main points that I think we probably should reiterate here at the tail end, just in case you guys need the fast synopsis. I think Dame's going to be a little bit of a value. I'm guessing his pre-rank is somewhere near where he finished last year, which is late second round. I would very much take him there. Giannis, draft if you're punting free throws. Brook Lopez, I looked to take him 80 or deeper this year because of that drop-off in the second half last season. Khris Middleton, I want nothing to do with outside of the top 130 in Roto only. Games cap only. Bobby Portis, you're looking at like a, honestly, similar to the Gary Trent mold, although maybe a little bit better. Portis head-to-head, after 100, Roto after 120, just because there's not a ton of upside there. You drop him in when somebody's out. And then, as we mentioned, Gary Trent Jr., 135, 140 or deeper. He's got to be kind of your last round pick where you're just like, I need some steals, I need some threes, and, you know, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle and he has a 3 threes, 1.8 steals season, and it all ends up being worthwhile. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody. Tomorrow, we may actually have time for 2 shows, especially if Yahoo Leagues are open. I want to make sure we come shooting out of the gates here, blasting off the blocks. Use another Olympic analogy. Out of the blocks fast. By the way, gold medal basketball game, for those interested, is Saturday, midday. USA and the host nation, La France. Should be a fun one. Crazy to see LeBron, Steph, KD going nuts in the fourth quarter. And Joel Embiid finally had his Olympic moment. What a game, man. That was a wild one. All right, thanks for watching live, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hitting that thumbs up button. Thanks for sharing. Everything you guys are doing is worthwhile. I promise you, I'm watching the numbers in the back end, and what you guys are doing matters every day. Every review, every share, every like, everything. We just see a few more people finding it and being like, oh, that's where Dan ended up every single day. So hugs and kisses. I'll see you guys again tomorrow.